The sun was covered from up in the clouds in the sky, sending cold weather across the country. The undead walkers, however, were not affected by this morning, and continued to walk into nowhere, looking for anything alive that they could devour into. Below down in the middle of Carolina Woods, the couple Lee Everett and his girlfriend Carly, with their adoptive daughter Clementine, walked through the woods as they carefully tried to avoid any walkers or any people that might try and rob them. It had been 2 years since the events of Savannah, and ever since then, the trio had stuck together like family and looked out for one another. They had been going place to place for safety, and one day they came across a bitten person who told them about a place called Wellington before he died, and Wellington was supposed to be a safe zone. Lee did not look that much different over the couple of years. His facial hairs had grown a little more, and his store he wore that same purple shirt wore that dark blue jeans, very familiar ones they wore all of this began. Carly didn't look much different either. She still wore that same purple coat with the green shirt and blue jeans. Her hair has grown a bit longer, but her height didn't seem to grow much either. As for Clementine, she looked completely different over the 2 years. She now wore a long white shirt with purple shirt over it. She wore gray pants, and her hat was still the same as her dad had gave her. Her skin color had got darker, and she now had her hair cut short, with loose ends tied to with separate ends. The trio continued walking through the forest and the woods, with Lee leading the entire way, as they had to defend themselves, while Carly's Glock 17 she always carried with her, and Lee carried a Browning automatic rifle Safari strapped onto his back. "Everyone all right?" Lee inquired, scanning the area for any walkers that might be lurking. "Yeah, we're fine," Carly assured, looking down towards Clementine, who had been silent since the day they woke up from this morning from the camp. "You okay, Clementine?" Clementine did not answer her question, and continued following Lee through the woods. Ever since the little girl witnessed her parents as walkers, whatever the child's innocence she had were gone, and sometimes it felt as if she was going to lose all hope for humanity. She may be a little girl, but she still had the mind of an adult. The trio remained silent while they continued their journey through the forest. Hopefully they were able to find some shelter by tonight. Otherwise, they were going to be in the cold all night and may not have survived without much shelter. But what's even worse, they knew that if you die and the brain's not destroyed, then you will turn into one of them. Walkers. Walkers were the only thing they feared for the rest of their lives in this godforsaken world. All of made slow, of course, with the hence nicknames walkers, but they possessed incredible strength, easily capable of breaking down doors, and now they have pretty much wiped out most of America's population. They outnumbered mankind, and for those who had survived, needed to do anything now just to survive. "Lee, what are we gonna do?" Carly asked, breaking the silence while moving her arms around in an attempt to keep warm. "Just keep running for the rest of our lives?" "We'll find somewhere to hold up, I promise," Lee promised, while keeping his eyes locked forward as they walked through the woods together. Then the sound of a twig breaking shot Lee through the eardrums, loud enough for him to hear, and in the act of panic, he placed his hand onto the beacon to halt further tracks. "Shh! Quiet, I hear something." Carly nodded as she moved her hand to her pocket and held her Glock 17 in the air, in case that they ran into unwanted attention. She kept Clementine close to her, while her boyfriend investigated the area. Lee took cover behind a tree, clutching his rifle as tight as he could, preparing to pull the trigger. He carefully leaned his head over towards the tree, spotting two figures in the corner of his eye. He turned around fully and aimed his rifle into the area they were in. Two walkers were crouched down upon the ground, eating what appeared to be a person. The sight of the smell of dead corpses caused Lee to groan in disgust, sometimes even unable to even look at it. He would usually just go around them, just to save animation, but they were blocking the way, and they were heading where they were going around them. In grass, however, may not be a good idea. Lee beckoned the area for the other two to carefully sneak over to him without making any noise. He turned towards Carly and informed her of the situation. "2 walkers are blocking our way. We can't shoot them." "We don't have any melee weapons, Lee," Carly reminded him, at the same time searching for her pockets with her hands free just to be sure. Clementine took note of what they were saying and pulled out something from her back pocket to show Lee. "Lee, I found this at the camp where there was a dead dog was. It looks sharp." Lee then raised a smile and just accepted the knife to his hand, remembering a couple of years ago when he met Clementine and how intelligent she was then to the other girls. "Thanks, Clem. Does look useful. This just is knife." "Yeah, just a knife," Clementine answered, crossing her fingers together and glaring over the 2 walkers enjoying their meal. This caused her to groan in disgust. "Ew!" "Here, Carly, you take this." Lee handed her a knife to stab one of the walkers. After all, he was stronger and capable of uses of rifles as melee weapon. "You stab one on the right, I'll get the one on the left." "Got it," Carly agreed, flipping the knife towards the ground, then facing upwards. "Clem, you stay here," Lee ordered, turning his rifle onto the opposite side, welding it to the axe, and he used it to the back of the motor end. Clementine wished that Lee did not try and treat her like a little kid anymore. He may have cut her hair and trained her to use a gun and how to survive, but he still treated her like a little girl when he met her at the treehouse when all this started. She crossed her arms as the 2 guardians advanced on the 2 walkers. Lee and Carly slowly approached the walkers from behind, with their weapons clutched tight in their hands. Upon standing only a couple of feet away from them, Lee and Carly both simultaneously struck their weapons into the walkers' skulls, killing them instantly. Lee rose up his rifle and strapped it back over across his back. He then shifted over his attention to Carly, who was struggling to retrieve her weapon out from the walkers. He encouraged her as she continued to pull as hard as she could with all of her strength. "You could do it, hun. Just give it a good pull." Carly nodded while exhaling a deep breath. She gave the knife one more tug. Finally, it came free. She almost had fallen over, but Lee was more than happy to catch her. "Thanks." "All right, we should keep moving," Lee suggested, reassuming his marching towards the path they were heading down, with his girlfriend and adoptive daughter tagging behind. Once they were on the back road, the trio remained quiet yet again. Ever since the events of Savannah, the three had always wondered if things would have been different or not. Kenny had offered them a chance to ride with him on the boat, but they only allowed Omid and Krista to take their place, and this was just a little mistake when Lee knew something but the rest of the group didn't. Krista was pregnant. Lee knew that by multiple hints that they were shown during the time he knew them. When they met, Omid and Krista were talking about it before Lee got on top of the bridge. Omid was really excited when he first met Clementine, and to top it off, Krista had vomited shortly after Lee dug up the grave of the dead dog. He did not confess this to Clementine or Carly, but hoped that it could when the time is right. All that matters now is finding somewhere safe for the night, and then continued their journey to Wellington. After an hour of walking through the forest, the trio's luck had finally turned around, and they found a place to stay for the night. They had stumbled upon a cabin in the middle of the backwoods of North Carolina. It looked like a great place to hold up for the night, but the question of it being occupied still remained. If it was people, that would be bad, but if it was walkers, then that would be twice as worse. Lee poked his head over the log that were taking cover behind to see a cabin in the middle of the woods, and it didn't look like anyone was home. "Looks empty. Maybe we can hold up there." Carly crawled over towards her boyfriend like an army soldier would. She too poked her head over the log to investigate. She had to admit it looked nice, but she would still prefer a nice condo any day. "Think there's anyone in there?" "Only one way to find out," Lee admitted, taking his rifle from the back of his grip, being as cautious as he would. Lee slowly marched towards the cabin with his rifle holstered. He made his way over to the nearest window, and being quiet as a mouse, Lee poked his head up through the window, and hopefully no one was home. He looked inside it to see there was a clean cabin with couches and a few decorations hanging on the walls. He continued checking the same room But then the moment he clearly seen no one was home, and it was clear Lee had raised the rifle smile and began to walk towards Clementine and Carly, back near the log. "Hey, it's all clear." "Don't move, asshole." Lee gasped and swiftly turned around in the quick of the act. He did not have the time to hold up his weapon when 6 people were standing in front of the cabin. To make things worse, 3 of them were carrying weapons, which aiming towards Lee. One of them looked Spanish and wore a checkered shirt. The only one of them was a woman who looked pregnant, and one of them looked quite big. One of them looked like quite old and was aiming a crossbow towards Lee. One of them resembled a lot like Kenny, but younger, and held a Winchester Model 70 to Lee. And a man with an orange shirt with aimed at a Glock 17 towards him. Lee dropped the rifle to the ground and raised his hands in surrender. He hoped they were not like the Save-Lot Bandits or the St. John's. "Look, who the hell are you people?" a man said, who looked like Kenny, but younger, and inquired, aiming his rifle towards them. "I didn't come here for trouble. Me and my girlfriend and my daughter were just looking for a place to stay. We're sorry," Lee apologized, turning his head for a moment, where he could see Carly and Clementine had surrounded themselves too, keeping their hands in the air. "Are you with Carver?" the pregnant woman inquired, yelling at her as her friends held them at gunpoint. "Who the hell is Carver?" Lee inquired, arching his eyebrow with his hand still in the air. "We're the ones asking the questions here," the crossbow man said, speaking a voice that sounded very familiar to Danny St. John's. Lee kept his hands raised with the man on the cap and the man in the green coat aimed their weapons at them, obviously demanding answers. "Look, we're just looking for a place to stay. Put the gun down, man." "Aw, screw that," the man said, with the cap refused. He continued looking towards each member of the group, while keeping his hands on Rose, of course. Lee was unsure of what to do, and feared for his life if he did not say something soon. He tried to think of a way to explain his actions, before any of them even thought of pulling the trigger. Lee tried to not show fear, as he was being held at gunpoint by 3 of the 6 members. Clementine and Carly had suddenly emerged from where they were hiding, keeping their hands raised in the air. The man who looked Spanish folded his arms together as he looked over Lee's shoulder, seeing the young girl with her hands raised too. She looked back towards the group, showing a change of expression. "They have a little girl with them." The other group took note of that and looked over towards Clementine, who felt slightly nervous as each of them glared towards her. The man in the orange shirt and the other one in the crossbow lowered their weapons down slightly, but as for the man resembled Kenny, he kept his rifle raised towards them. "Nick, put the gun—" The man with the crossbow was about to push his nephew down, but in act of panic, he had fired his gun, almost hitting Lee in the process. The crossbow man angrily snatched the gun out of his hand. "Nick!" The gunshot ran through the area, startling everyone. "What the hell?" Lee swore, swiftly picked up his rifle again, and they were not looking in their direction, and their attention focused with the man with the cap. Carly quickly took her chance to act and pulled on her Glock and aimed it towards them. She stood in front of Clementine in her protective manner, already picking up her target. The man with the cap, and he would not be hard to miss, since she was an excellent marksman. The man in the orange shirt aimed his weapon towards Lee again, fearing that he was going to shoot now that they have just given the perfect opportunity to get their weapons. "You idiot!" the pregnant woman cursed, annoyed as to what he could have done with their coincidence are. "Every lurker for 5 miles probably heard that." "Hey, we don't know these people," the man with the hat clashed. "Everyone just calm down a minute," the man in the yellow glasses suggested, sensing the situation was about to get bad if he did not step in and do something soon. The Spanish man walked towards the 3, standing only a few feet away. He seemed to have a change of attitude towards them once they noticed they have a child with them. "You say you're not with Carver?" "We don't know any Carver," Lee reassured him, raising the rifle down that he was no longer being at gunpoint. We're sorry if we disturbed you folks. We'll just turn around and go. I swear you'll never see us again." The Spanish man looked back towards the cabin entrance when he heard the door from inside. His expression changed to a serious one, and he glared back towards the door. A young girl who looked like a couple years older than Clementine, but a bit taller, poked her head out from the door, either noticing that they had guests or worried as they were gunshots a moment ago. Who were they? "Sarah, what did I say? Get back inside," the Spanish man ordered, raising his voice slightly, yet in a worried, serious manner. The young girl known as Sarah obeyed his wishes and moved back inside the cabin, closing behind her. After they were gone, Lee looked back towards the Spanish man and the cabin and put two and two together, realizing he must be her father. Since they shared the same skin color, he had an idea. Hopefully it would work. "Look, was that your daughter?" "That's none of your business," he snapped, showing that he was extremely protective of his daughter, and his attitude suddenly changed of expression. "Look, I know how you feel, old man. Clementine here is my family, and I know how it feels to try and protect them as best you can," Lee explained, showing that they were both not look so different from one another. The Spanish took note of what he said, and folded his arms together as he shifted his attention over towards the member of the cabin. The man with the crossbow and the man with the orange shirt gave him a supportive nods. As for the rest of them, they remained neutral for now. He shifted his attention back towards Lee, but at the same time keeping his attention on Clementine. "She's your daughter, then?" Lee was about to answer yes, but to show them that they were not bad people, he decided to be honest with them. After all, honesty is important nowadays. "No, she lost her real parents a long time ago. Me and my girlfriend were just doing what we can for her." The Spanish man had a couple of doubts that these random strangers, but something inside of him was telling him to give him a chance. "Why don't you come in? You could stay for tonight, but you'll have to be gone by tomorrow." "Thanks, we appreciate it," yet Lee reassured, giving them a slight nod to his girlfriend for a moment, before he decided to introduce himself properly to the cabin of the group. "I'm Lee, and this is Carly and Clementine." "Carlos," the Spanish man introduced, gesturing the arms to each of the cabin members as they spoke their names. "This is Luke, Pete, Nick, Rebecca, and Alvin." "I hate to interrupt, but it's going to rain soon," Pete interrupted, stating the obvious as he looked up towards the dark clouds. "We should get inside." The others agreed and made their way inside of the cabin to take shelter from the storm before it hit. But it did not look like a great place for Lee, Carly, and Clementine to hold up for the night, before continuing their journey up north to Wellington. An hour or so had passed since the group allowed the trio to stay for the night. During this time, they got to know the Free a little better. Lee had a different opinion on each of the cabin group members while he got settled in. Luke and Pete seemed like good people. Carlos looked a little protective and paranoid, but he was still a good guy. Nick he did not like so much at the moment, since he would have killed him out there earlier than firing that gun. Or worse, attract walkers. He did not even have the chance to talk with Rebecca or Alvin due to her showing untrusting attitude towards them. But this may be because of her pregnancy. Inside the main cabin of the room, Lee and Carly sat together in one of the couches with Luke and Pete, sitting on the opposite side, sitting on the other couch. Clementine was not present at the moment, as she was in the kitchen eating some food Luke was kind enough to give to her. Lee had just finished telling them the entire story in this godforsaken world on how they ended up in the middle of Carolina woods. It was a lot to take in, but it was worth listening to. "Wow, a lot happened to you people," Luke admitted, unsure of what to exactly say about their story. "This Kenny you mentioned, what do you think happened to him? His family and the others too you mentioned." "Not sure," Lee admitted, scratching the top of his head for a moment. He was about to mention them about Wellington, but then changed his mind for some reason. "Maybe he found somewhere safe. I don't know." "Well, I hope he and his family are doing well," Pete wished, raising a smile slightly while he stood up from where he was sitting down. "Well, I think we should all get our wings because I'm going fishing tomorrow, and I could do with some help." Wouldn't that be nice? Now let's get some shut-eye. This place is lit up like a beacon in the middle of the woods." "Right, I'll help out," Luke said, standing up, and the older man, who was following him out of the room. He turned back towards the two before he left. "You both can sleep on those couches. Then there's some blankets in the closet. Sorry, we ain't got no more rooms." "Thanks, Luke. We appreciate it," Lee assured, giving him a friendly nod. Luke returned to the friendly nod before following Pete out of the living room. Meanwhile, Clementine had excused herself from her dinner to go to the bathroom. Alvin was kind enough to show her where it was, and already she could tell that this man was nice. She made her way upstairs and was supposed to be on the door to the left, but her memory slipped and accidentally walked into the wrong room. Inside, Sarah was lying against her bed with a book in her hands. She gasped slightly when Clementine accidentally walked inside, but it took a matter of seconds to calm her down. "Sorry," Clementine apologized, about to leave before she caused any trouble. "Wrong room." "No, wait!" Sarah called her back for a moment, not wanting her to go yet. "Why don't you stay? Just for a few minutes, please?" Clementine arched a furious eyebrow why the older girl wanted her to stay, but nevertheless, she agreed to her request and walked inside, closing the bedroom door behind her. She stood a couple of feet away and observed the book in Sarah's hands, not expecting to see people still reading. "What are you reading?" "A book," Sarah answered. "It's obvious." "What book? I like books," Clementine admitted. "It's called The Gurgles." "Gurgles," Sarah explained, setting her book down with the pages still open to speak the young girl, still standing in front of her. "It's about a transdimensional body snatchers." "Cool," Clementine simply said, not really knowing how to respond. "I'm Sarah," Sarah introduced herself, standing up on her bed, revealing herself to be quite taller than Clementine. "I'm Clementine." Clementine introduced herself too. Deep down, she was a little happy to find someone not far from her age. "We could be friends, right?" Sarah asked, obviously eager to be best friends with another girl, almost her age. "We could be best friends. I haven't met another girl my age since before, and it's hard to, be the only girl, you know? Rebecca's okay, but she's older, and that's it. And if the baby's a girl, then it'll be forever because she's old enough to be, like, my best friend, and then I'll be super old." Despite Clementine's feeling a little uncomfortable by Sarah's childish behavior, she felt that this girl needed a friend, and decided to give the friendship a try. "Yes, we're friends. Promise?" Sarah asked. "It's important. Friends have to trust each other, no matter what. Do you promise or not?" "I promise," Clementine promised. "Me too. Friends?" Sarah smiled, holding out a pinky finger for her right hand to her and Clementine to pinky swear. She watched as Clementine accepted pinky swear, and that gave her a little hope. Pinky swear is forever. "Yeah, I know," Clementine smiled, ending the pinky shake. Before long, Clementine decided that she would leave the room before Carlos unexpectedly walked inside, only to assume worse. She bidded Sarah farewell as she left the bedroom. She had to admit it. It was nice for her to meet someone around her own age. She liked Carly, of course, but like Sarah, Clementine thought Carly was a good friend, but just a little bit too old. Back downstairs, after the two men exited out of the room, the young man who resembled Kenny, known as Nick, and by his uncle, walked into the room. He sat down on the opposite side of the two of the unapologetic expression across his face. "Hey, look, I'm sorry for being a, dumbass out there and almost shooting you. It's just, we're letting in strangers once and..." "And what?" Carly inquired. "And they were bit. We tried to take care of it, but I lost my mom that day," Nick admitted, trying his best to hold back the tears as best as he could. He got back up on his feet and made his way out of the living room, but stopped when he turned around the duo for a moment. "Hope you understand." Lee was about to answer with decline his apology, but he had a change of heart when he remembered what it was like to lose someone you were close with. He knew this because his parents and his brother's deaths when all of this began, and he was the one who had to put down his brother. "Yeah, we do." Nick raised a slight smile across his face, but decided to leave the two alone and head back to his bedroom. Clementine was back in the kitchen after befriending Sarah in the cabin, and now she almost finished the food that Nick had given her, and now she felt that she needed a rest. While she was sitting there, Carlos entered the kitchen without greeting and began washing his hands in the sink. He continued to do so while Clementine continued to eat until he finally spoke. "Are you going to be a problem to my daughter?" "Excuse me?" Clementine replied, wanting to make sure that she just heard him correctly. "You talk to her. Are you going to be a problem to my daughter?" Carlos repeated, his voice calm yet slightly serious when he continued to wash his hands in the sink. "No," Clementine answered, arching a curious eyebrow, wanting to know why Carlos would think a little girl would be a problem. What makes you think I would do anything like that? Well, if you and your friends are going to stay, there are a few things you need to know about my daughter, Carlos answered, drying his hands with a towel while he stared outside of the window. Okay, Clementine slightly nodded, knowing this man was only protective of his daughter, just like how Lee and Carly were looking out for her. She isn't like you. You may not get that initially, but once you're around her for a while, you'll understand, Carlos explained, crossing his arms together while looking out of the kitchen window before closing his eyes. Imagine what would happen if Sarah was to know what was like out there. If she knew how bad the world is, what is really out there, she would cease to function. She's my little girl. She's all I have left, and I would ask if you please do not tell her about what it's like out there. I won't, I promise, Clementine promised, giving a slight supportive nod, despite him being turned around from her view. Thank you, I appreciate that, Carlos replied, trusting Clementine to be around his daughter, knowing that she had her promise. Before long, he left the kitchen to go check up on his daughter and put her to bed properly. He was not willing to let these new people visit her yet, until he knew that they could be trusted. A little while later, nighttime had finally risen to the fullest, and everyone who was a part of the cabin had tucked in for the night. As for the 3 guests, they were going to have to sleep on the couch for tonight, but that did not matter long as they were inside and sheltered from the storm. Lee and Carly sat together on one of the couches. As Lee kept his arm around her, he sighed and looked over towards Clementine, who had fallen asleep long ago on the armchair. Carly, what do you think of these people? I'm not sure, Carly admitted, resting her hand down against Lee's shoulder. What do you think? Lee thought about her question for a moment, and that moment before he looked over towards the sleeping Clementine, curled up in a ball as she slept. I'll do whatever is best for Clementine. You're still worried about her, aren't you? Carly inquired, making herself comfortable against his shoulder. Of course I am, Carly, Lee admitted, looking towards the young girl, who had been raised up as his own daughter, trying his best to keep her safe as much as possible. He remembered when there were times where something could have happened to her, like when she got grabbed by a walker twice, but Lee was quick enough to save her. Andy St. John threatened to hurt her, and Lee was unable to do anything. She could have been killed by the bandits, and to top it off, they were trapped in a city full of walkers. He sighed and looked over towards Carly, and was about to speak further, but till she discovered that she had fallen asleep, while she had been thinking to himself for too long. He smiled and planted a slight peck on her head. He too had to get some rest for the night. He would need his energy, since he'll be going to help Pete morning for some catch fish.